Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Captive Scorpion is the story of prisoner of war trooper Mick Holland of the Long Range Desert Group and his 9 escape attempts. Every time we scratch the surface of the Second World War, a rare gem is uncovered. This is certainly one. It is the latest by Brendan O'Carroll, and I'm delighted to say that Brendan joins me live on the line now. Brendan, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Giles. Nice to be here.
Pleasure's all my way. Where did we find you this morning? Where is home today?
Home is in Auckland, New Zealand, a long way from Spain.
Wow. Well, indeed. Well, thank you for joining. Well, in which case, good evening to you, sir. Right then.
Yes, indeed.
So, in which case, how did you come across Mick Holland? What's your connection to find this particular story then?
Well, I've been researching the Long Range Desert Group since 2000, and I've written 11 books. And it was just by pure chance that the nephew of Mick Holland, who's a subject of the Captive Scorpion, when he was a lad, his auntie Mick Holland died, in 1981, and his auntie threw out all his medals, all his books, all his memoirs, and his artifacts and badges. And little his nephew was only 11, and he said, "Oh, auntie, could I dive into that and take all those things home, for my collection?" Now, I met Alex, his name was, about 2 years ago, and he says, "Oh, I've read your books. I'd love to give you the memoirs for the story of Mick Holland. I've had these since I was a kid, and I think it'd make a great story." And that's where it began. So he gave me that, and I built a story around it.
Well, the question is, I mean, the auntie throwing away the medals for a start and all the memorabilia. But yeah. I mean, when a member of the public comes up to you and says, "I've got some stuff for my grandfather, my father, my uncle, whatever," you go, "Okay, fine, maybe he was a cook or something like that." And then you open up the box and you've got that sitting there. Is it sort of like Christmas Day for you, Brendan?
Oh, indeed, yes. Because I am a collector, and I have a great interest in militaria. And so I'm always interested in seeing such things, and photographs, of course, for my books, because all my books are well illustrated. I like to have as many pictures as possible, because that tells the story in a great way.
So tell me a little bit about, because we tend to think about the people who served in the Second World War as that being sort of the be-all and end-all, and we kind of forget their life before that. So if you can, give me a bit, because he doesn't land in the deserts of North Africa fully formed. There's normally an interesting story beforehand. So who introduce us, if you can, to who Mick Holland is before the war.
Yes, indeed. Now, Mick was a pretty smart guy. Before the war, he joined the New Zealand Territorial Army. That's like the volunteer army. He did that, and he is also a bandsman. He played in the military band. He also enjoyed swing music, and he had his own band, which he played privately. So he enjoyed a good time in that way. He also, strangely enough, took up flying, and he used to fly tiger moths. And this is all before the war, as a young man in his 20s. And then... that's basically what he did prior to the war. He also got himself married as well. Yeah. So it put a lot into his early years.
So he's basically sort of this jazz age figure, isn't he? Because light aircraft, you can go and literally buy one and then learn how to fly, not the other way around. I mean, tiger moths are very, very cheap, and also that whole jazz band sort of thing.
Oh yeah, no, he's a great. He even won prizes. He's such a good trumpet player, and he used to do the last post, for the ceremonies and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But once the war came, he joined up, of course, and he joined the New Zealand Medical Corps. That's right. He decided, which is very strange to think a man who took flying would join the Air Force, but for some reason he didn't. God knows why. And then then when the war came, he was sent to Fiji for 9 months in the Pacific, looking after the army blokes over there. And then in 1942, he went to the Middle East. And that's where his story begins for the book, from the Middle East.
That's really interesting, because, I mean, he might have just ended up sort of, in the Pacific, sort of fighting off, the Japanese as they come into the war. So, I mean, I suppose it's a stroke of luck for the Long Range Desert Group that he does actually end up with the, with the Kiwis and going all the way over to the Middle East.
Yeah, no, it was. And as it turns out, the Long Range Desert Group, you have to have a certain physical and mental and technical quality to join up, because they are a special force. They're one of the first special forces of World War II, and they fought deep behind the lines in Libya. And So you had to be pretty self-contained and a pretty tough sort of guy.
So is he in Iran? Is he in Alexandria? Is he in Cairo? Where does he sort of meet and get involved
Cairo,
with?
Yeah. It's always Cairo where they started. And the New Zealand division had a base camp, a place called Mahdi, which is in Cairo, and that's their training camp. And that's where Mick went. And they saw a sign calling for volunteers for the long-range desert group. And so we thought he'd give it a go. And of course, they jumped on him straight away because not only he was a medical orderly, and all these patrols that went out all had medical orderlies. They needed those. He also was very intelligent. He could speak Italian and he could speak German as well as Arabic. Not completely, but enough to get by. And so they thought, we'd grab him. He's got all these skills. And is also mature. By this time, he is 30.
Wow.
And that's quite an old man for the Army at the time. And he was a sergeant when he was in the Pacific. So he dropped rank to join the LIDG and joined as a trooper, which is like a private.
You see, this is the thing, because we tend to think of them all these special forces, and apologies to all my first-person shooter playing computer game fans out there, as being these big sort of like, Arnie Schwarzenegger types who shoot first and ask questions later, but they're not like that. They're worried, they're intelligent. I mean, speaking German, knowing enough to get by German, Italian, and Arabic is absolute, and being a medic, and obviously if he knows how a plane works, he knows how an engine works, so therefore he can fix something when it breaks, which it will do. So he is absolutely, and presumably he brings that certain New Zealand je ne sais quoi, shall we say?
Yes. But he also, not only being a medic in the LIDG, you had to be multitasked.
Yeah.
So he was also a gunner. His role in the LIDG was mainly as a gunner. So he had a big machine gun, which is responsible for and used in action. He could also drive the truck. He could navigate, and he had to be a cook. So they had to do a whole variety of jobs. But if there was any casualties, his or the enemy, it was his job as the medic to do what he could.
So, I mean, who does he meet out there? Because, I mean, everybody's going to be thinking sort of rogue heroes or whatever at this point, because that the BBC TV series, which goes on about the SAS, but that is sprung from the Long Range Desert Group. So, if you think of, people immediately think, massive beards, headscarves, 40 caliber machine guns, and also they won't think trucks. They tend to think jeeps, don't they? So but this is early days presumably. So what is it?
Well, he joined later, 1942, and they had Chevrolet trucks. These are 30 hundredweight Chev trucks. Okay. 1942 models. So these are the classic LIDG heavy trucks. They're heavily armed with machine guns, totally packed with equipment, so they could be in the desert for weeks on end. Totally self-contained. And they all had patrols of 5 trucks led by 1 Jeep. So they're all heavy trucks in 1 Jeep, and they're like armed. And their main role of the LIDG, of course, was intelligence gathering and mapping and rescuing down airmen or shooting up forts or shooting up the roads. But his first job was what they call the road watch, which means they'd go way behind the lines and spy on the enemy as they're going along the coast road. And so every truck, every tank, every vehicle, whatever's going along that road to the front, they were spying and recording and sending that information back to HQ in Cairo. So that's their intelligence gathering role. And when they finished doing that after a couple of months, they became more aggressive and they started ambushing enemy convoys and attacking their forts, blowing up dumps and doing things like that.
Because sorry, Brendan, please go on. Yeah.
And then they went on helping the SAS in their raids on the airfields. Because initially, the SAS, their first mission was a total disaster. And so they decided to get the LIDG to drive them to the outskirts of an airfield, and the raiders would do their job, and then the LIDG would bring them back home. But on the way home was very fraught because they're being chased by the enemy, shot up, and all this sort of carry on. So there's a lot of action going on, a lot of violence, if you like. And it was quite funny because Mick was a medical orderly, but also a gunner. So he'd end up shooting all these people in a convoy or in action. And then if they went up to them after they'd been finished, it was his job to try to fix them up. And he could be the man who just bloody shot them.
Yeah, here's what I prepared earlier, as the saying goes.
Yeah, that's right. But in the LIDG, because they're so far behind the lines, they couldn't deal with serious wounds. Like if you're seriously wounded, there's no dressing station, no hospital, no doctor. And so they always carried extra morphine. So they'd do mercy killing. So if somebody, one of their own or one of the enemy were there, were, terribly wouldn't survive several days, they just got multiple doses of morphine and they could just go to sleep.
Yeah.
And if they had no morphine left, they just shot them in the head. That was just the reality of deep behind the lines that, where you've got no option.
Yeah, I mean, because one of the things about this particular campaign is a lot of it is just fought on this single sort of coast strip, isn't it? I mean, I know when you've got when you've got the Operation Torch, they're coming in from Tunisia, and that's a different sort of landscape. But this terrain, the majority is fought back and forth along this coast road. So you have the whole of sort of Libya and Egypt to duck down, or especially Libya, to duck down into and hide. The great sand sea, as they call it.
Correct. Yeah. So, but as trouble started, they had this great raid called the Baci raid.
Yeah.
This is when they went. They took them 11 days from Cairo to Baci, which is an Italian town, an airfield, across the sand dunes, a massive job, 17 trucks. And when they got there, the Kiwis, they went with the Guards Patrol and the Kiwi Patrol. The Kiwis went in and shot up all these aeroplanes. They destroyed 27 aircraft and damaged about another 11. And the British Guards went into the town and shot up the town and enemy barracks, vehicles, fuel dumps and all sort of stuff. So it was a big raid all at once. And as they were going out leaving the airfield, they struck a couple of Italian tanks, light tanks. This is in a narrow street and they couldn't get out. So they just charged through the tanks and broke them apart. These are only light tanks, so it was an easy job. But they got entangled. And then Mick was in the back of that truck, and he got into a fight with the Italians. And a long story short is he actually got captured. And after that raid, there was eight Kiwis and 2 Brits who were captured as prisoners of war. And that's where his story really starts.
Yeah, exactly. Because because this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, this is 9 escape attempts. Presumably, is he relatively lucky to be captured by the Italians? Because does the commando order? Obviously, Hitler's put out.
I think you should say that. This is my next point. The commando order is very relevant.
Yeah.
Because what happened? The LODG, when they went there, they weren't wearing any insignia. No insignia on their trucks. New Zealand trucks had Maori names printed on them,
right?
Because that meant nothing to an Italian or a German, and they wore no badges, no insignia, nothing on their trucks, and so unfortunately, what happened when the Guards went into the town, they shot up a hospital, a medical centre there, which they didn't know because all the raids took place at night, so it was all dark, and they just thought they were more of the enemy barracks, and so that was a tragedy that these nurses and doctors and patients, some were killed and many wounded. And so when the Italians had these prisoners, they're going to charge them all as being saboteurs because they weren't wearing uniform or insignia. And they said, no, you're all bandits, saboteurs. You're going to be court-martialed for the murder of all these medical people. And the next day, they convened a courts-martial, and there was about 5 Italian officers and 1 German officer on that panel. And they decided, and it was only because of the German officer, for some strange reason, didn't agree with the Italians and says, no, we won't execute you, we'll treat you as soldiers. And that's funny because, as you said, that commando order was out at that time, and Hitler ordered that every SAS man or commando man was to be executed. So I don't know what happened there. I don't know how they got away with it, but this German must have been, a pretty humane sort of guy and realised that they were just soldiers doing a job. And then in the end, they just got sent to Italy in a prison ship.
So whereabouts does he end up? Is he up in the north of Italy? Does he end up? Yeah.
I know when he arrived, it was towards sort of like in the middle of Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where he arrived, and then he went to a prisoner of war camp there, and he remained there. In 1943, of course, the Italians surrendered.
Yes.
And suddenly all these camps were free, and all the Italian guards virtually walked out.
But he's only got a small window of opportunity because they haven't, because it's supposed to be coordinated. The Italians go off too quick. The Allies aren't ready for it. And of course, the Germans come in and then it gets very, very nasty.
Exactly. And that's my next part of the story.
Right.
You obviously know the story very well.
I'm that worst sort of creature, Brendan. I'm an armchair historian, unfortunately,
Yeah, you know the story. Because as you know, they were all there and they're told by the British command that they remain in the camp until the British troops advance and liberate you properly. Because we don't know what to do with you, or there's thousands of you around the country. But old Mick and about 4 other mates said, no, bugger this. He said, no, we're going to go. We're going to go. So they disobeyed the orders, and they shot through to this little hill overlooking the camp and where they slept when they got up there. And the next morning when they woke up, they saw German armoured cars coming in and a convoy of trucks. And all those Germans from his camp, all those Brits and Kiwis from his camp were sent to Germany as POWs. Ooh. So he was so lucky. That was his first escape that was successful. And from there began this incredible trek all around Italy, which he virtually walked about half the length of Italy in between being captured again.
Because I'm trying to think, he's got to sort of head north, isn't he? Because he can't go south because the Italians are fighting. Right. They've got sort of Anzios happening in, and the what's it line, so he's got to try and head towards Switzerland. Good luck with that one.
No, that's right. So what he did. Oh no, they're so lucky. The Italian peasants or the people in the hills looked after these blokes on the run. They weren't, they're anti-fascists and they're just ordinary folk, and they took them in and fed them and looked after them and sheltered them. Because Mick had the huge advantage of being able to speak Italian, so he got on really well with these people, and he also could get around the country because he had quite tan skin. There's quite olive, and also he just had the shape and the form of an Italian. So people just assumed he was an Italian.
But the thing is, Brad, I mean, he joins. I mean, so he's looking swarthy. He's got the beard and the whole thing. He speaks Italian. He joins the partisans. Now, at this point, if you're a young or a bloke in the hills, you either join the Carabinieri, the Italian police force. Yeah. Or you get sent to work for German as a, quote unquote, as a pioneer. You end up, basically doing slave labour. Or you're a partisan. And again, if you're a partisan and the Germans catch you, they're going to shoot you because you're a partisan.
Oh, sure. That's right. Oh, no, he was with the partisans for several months, where his LIDG skills were invaluable in terms of laying mines, shooting up trucks, and ambush tactics and all that sort of thing, and also being a medic, which they really appreciated. But he didn't want to stay with them for long because he just wanted to keep moving. Yeah. So he left the partisans. It's quite funny. A few days after he started his great walk again, it's snowing by this time, and he walked through the snow, and suddenly these 3 Germans popped up. We were wearing white camouflage uniforms and said, no, put your hands up. And they discovered that he could speak Italian and German. And they were fascinated by that. And they said, we'll give you 2 choices. You can either go back to the POW camp or you can join us as an interpreter. So Mick, being clever, said, this is another opportunity to escape. He said, I'll join you as an interpreter. So they took him in, gave him an Italian uniform, so people thought he was just an Italian. But he got on so well with these people because they're actually parachutists or Fallschirmjäger from the Hermann Göring division. They were quite an elite unit at the time. And he was embedded with them, with the NCOs, and they had the same barracks as the NCOs and ate and drank with the NCOs. And he virtually became one of them. And they all loved him. They called him Tommy, of course, as they called all Brits. And they had a great time with him. And
but again, he's lucky again because he doesn't. It's Germans of a certain type, because you've obviously got a German officer at the beginning in Africa. You've got Fallschirmjäger, who, as you say, are and they are thoroughly fed up because they're not in Italy doing what they want to be doing, which is leaping out of planes and descending on Crete, and they're having to fight on the line all the way back to the Gothic line, and they're getting and they're being led by complete idiots. So I can imagine him getting on quite well. But the thought of this guy, translating as didn't some sort of, if it was a film, Brendan, you'd have some sort of Christoph Weiss full-on Nazi going, and what is this man doing here? Yeah. So does he get rumbled, or how does he,
he said in his writings that these are all good lads and there were no Nazis there. None of them seemed to be Nazis or fanatics. And in the end, they trusted him so much that he used to go to the town and pick up the vegetables on the little truck and bring them back and all this sort of stuff. So he got all these jobs.
Right.
And but one day he thought we'd had enough of this. So he filled the truck full of petrol and said, I'm going to get all the fruit and veg for us like I always do. And he just continued into the hills and just drove as far as he could until his truck ran out of petrol. Okay. And then he continued his great walk, as it were. But what he said he always carried with him I'm just looking at my notes here, he always carried with him a brush, soap, comb, and a very small mirror. So he never was unshaven. He always shaved. Yeah. So he didn't look like the man on the run. He looked like a local who was just clean shaven and doing his own business. And he wore didn't wear a uniform. He wore civilian clothes. which he got from the peasants. And so he just looked like a man walking around. And so that was one of his great tricks. And he could go to the local restaurant, he could go to the movie theatres, go to the taverns, and just he'd be surrounded by Germans. They just all assumed he was an Italian.
I mean, papers, though, well, didn't he have any documentation, or presumably, because I'm just thinking...
No, all he had was his New Zealand dog tags,
right,
which he wore all the time.
Okay.
That was his ID.
Good grief.
And,
I mean, this is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. I mean, how this isn't a better known, Brendan, because this is incredible stuff. So
he's so lucky.
Does he sort of, after caking in a few, Gone with the Wind or something like that, does he then sort of stroll nonchalantly? Does he get lifted again? Is there a story about a German staff car?
A number of times.
Right.
What happened is that there's a prize of 1,800 lira if you capture a prisoner of war on the run, because Italy was full of escaped prisoners of war, from the liberation. And so if you caught one, you got this great reward. So he always had this problem of being betrayed by people. So he'd be good with the peasants in the mountains and get on well, but there'd always be one or two who'd after the money. And so he got picked up that way a few times. But he was always a loner. He always operated alone. That was his secret, always alone. He didn't join other prisoners or anything like that. And his idea was to keep clean-shaven so no one could spot the difference. But another good trick he used to do is seeing what he got here. I mean, because he used to get caught and then he'd go back to prison.
Yeah.
And he'd always used to volunteer to go on working parties, but they used to use prisoners, for farming, for agriculture or whatever. And one day in Italy, he was sent to a timber mill where they milled timber and carried big planks and logs. And one day when the guards went looking, all he did was pick up this huge plank, put it on his shoulder, and walk down the road carrying it nonchalantly as if nobody was looking. And he just did that till he was far away, threw the plank in the bush and just ran away again. And that was just one occasion. An occasion he was in Germany where he was harvesting hay, and he had this big scythe, and he was doing that all day. And he threw the scythe in the long grass by the road. And when the guards went looking or having a break, he just got the scythe, put it on his shoulder and walked down the road as if he was a German farmer. And he carried that scythe for 3 days until he was caught sleeping under a tree when a German policeman found him wondering what he's doing.
So he's in Germany then. So I mean,
how bold he was.
They get him out of. So he's out of Italy. He's in Germany. You would have thought that he would have.
I'm sort of getting a bit ahead there. He did a few more things in Italy.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that one of his tricks was to join working parties.
Yeah.
And use that as a way to get out. But he also got caught one time, and he got quite a severe punishment. He was sent to a castle dungeon, and he ended up being there for 54 days.
Oof.
And all he was given to eat was bread, and the only drink was coffee. So 54 days with bread and coffee. He wrote in his memoirs that his skin was like fish scales. You could just pick it all off. All his skin was scaly, red and sore. But he just picked them all off. But it didn't stop him. Like most people, if you suffered that, you'd be suffering a bit mentally. You'd say, I'm not going to do this again. I'm just going to stay in the camp and rest and see out the war. But that's what most people would do, or either that or they'd crack up. But he did none of that. As soon as he got back, he started planning his next escape. It was just amazing.
Because here's the thing, Brendan, because I know you say, I'm going to sit in the camp and see out the war, but as it all sort of starts collapsing in 44, nobody's really sure what's going to happen. We know how it plays out but at the time you think, okay, well, they might just panic and shoot everybody, and the Soviets are coming out. You want to be caught by the Allies, obviously, if they're coming out from Italy, but you can't think, I'll hang out, because people know how the Germans can operate at this situation. So sitting it out isn't really an option for somebody like him. So how does he does he get out eventually? I mean,
he got out again.
Yeah.
He had all these they had 7 escapes. Another one he did when he came out after he'd been in that bloody dungeon.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a system in this camp where they put out big, huge sacks of rubbish.
Right.
They took it through the gate and had it some distance from the camp, and that was picked up another day. So him with a couple of mates helping out put himself in the rubbish bag, and his mates sewed it up and put it on the cart to go out. So the cart took it out and was dumped some distance from the camp, and just at a little ledge, and then it'd be picked up by a truck another day. So he went in there, buried inside the sack, and when it was night time, he carried a razor blade. He just cut the sack open and crawled out and walked away. Now, that sounds pretty straightforward, but that's sort of boldness he did. He'd just been in prison for 54 days in a dungeon, but it didn't stop him. So that was just another trick he did to get out. And another trick very similar when he was caught again, there was this bread cart that had come into the camp.
Yeah.
That's a horse and cart. And under this driver's seat was a little cupboard where you put your raincoat and your boots and stuff. And when no one was looking, because he's very vigilant, he went and hid in that cupboard. And when they'd finished unloading the bread, he just went out the camp on the bread cart until it stopped at some stable somewhere. And at night, he just jumped out and continued his walk. Like this fellow you can make a movie about him. It's so funny.
Absolutely. I've only got 2 minutes left, Brendan. I could talk to you until the bread carts come home. So, tell me a little.
I'll tell you his greatest story then.
Go on.
This is his best story of the lot.
Right.
I must tell you this one. He was helping out in Munich when there had been all prisoners of war were used for cleaning up bombing damage.
Yeah.
In Munich, they had a big air raid, so they sent him in to clean up the stuff along with hundreds of others. And they had the bomb. Then there was an air raid. So all the prisoners and all the guards dispersed. And he said, no, the hell with this. And he ran into the city where he come across a railway station where he saw a German staff car parked there. And he looked around and said, no one there. And he saw that the car had a key in it.
Right.
So he jumped in, started it up and drove towards the Swiss border. And just unbelievable. Then he stopped to get his bearings. And then he looked on the back and said, oh, there's a German colonel's uniform in here.
No.
So he put the tunic on and the hat. Yeah, he did the whole true story, and he continued to drive. And he went through all these minor checkpoints, and all he did was salute in this great way and drive straight on through because the car had a pennant on it showing a high rank. And then as he got towards the border, he saw that the site there was larger. There was more troops. So he quickly pulled over, took his tunic and his hat off because if he got caught with that, he would have been shot as a spy. So he continued on, thinking he just tried to get through anyway. But they overwhelmed him and he got captured there. And he was interrogated by an SS officer who was more incensed about him stealing a colonel's car than his escape plan. So that just shows you how bold he was.
Obviously, he sees out the war. People, you're going to have to go and buy the book to find out, the whole thing. But
a lot of detail in there.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot more than my broad picture.
Exactly. But
That's for sure.
after the war, a happy life, presumably. I mean,
No, he had a few problems. He smoked like hell and was a heavy drinker.
Right.
He also lost a leg in 1960.
Okay.
From a war wound. That he had lost all his nerves and the leg had to be taken off. But he actually accidentally sat on his pet dog and killed it because he was sitting on his wooden leg went on the dog. It was only a little dog.
No. Okay, I'm going to have to leave him with it because I've only got 40 seconds. But it's an amazing story. It's got to be a movie.
Yes.
Listeners, go to the TRE bookstore. You'll see the picture, the handsome guy looking like Lawrence of Arabia. It's called Captive Scorpion. Brendan, if people want to find you, do you have a do you have a website or something like that? Can people find you online?
I work through Facebook groups,
right?
Like the Long Range Desert Group Preservation Society.
Brilliant. Well, listen,
and you'll find me there.
I will absolutely find it right after this interview. Listen, congratulations. This is an amazing book. It's an amazing story. Brendan O'Carroll, thank you so much for joining me. And so thank you so much for bringing the story of Mick Holland to life. Thank you for your time today.